Greetings, Fire Chargers, Darkblade here, and in this video I'm going to talk about the augment, a feature of ancient Greek grammar. In ancient Greek, verbs do this thing called an augment in three tenses. Those are the imperfect, the aorist, and the pluperfect tense. Perfect tense. They don't do this in the other tenses. Now, the augment makes the stem longer by lengthening either making the vowel longer or adding another vowel to the front. This is determined by whether the vowel begins in a vowel or a consonant. If it begins in a vowel, that vowel becomes longer, as you can see through this chart. I wonder what the we digraph, spelled upsilon iota, does. I mean, the diphthong. And I presume. And what about and what about an alpha with an iota subscript? I assume that just becomes an eta with an iota subscript. And again, I only checked one word on Wiktionary. And again, the word for sing has an iota subscript with an alpha, and I forgot what happens when I check that on Wiktionary. So as you can see, alpha turns to eta, and so does epsilon. Iota and epsilon simply lengthen, and omicron becomes omega. This I becomes eta with an iota subscript, as does a. Ow and U become U, but with an eta. Oi becomes O, omicron with an iota subscript. And if the verb begins in an eta or an omega, simply nothing happens. However, there are a few epsilon verbs that change to a, not eta. Echo is one. Echo is one, and its imperfect is acon. And A and U sometimes don't augment. They just stay as they are. And the only difference is that they take the imperfect or aorist into personal endings. This is weird. Personally, I find this weird and more complex than it needs to be. With Latin, there was just all the tenses had the same set of personal endings for the most part. The perfect tense has its own set. So this is what is called temporal augment. The syllabic augment is the one you see here if a verb begins in a consonant. They just add an epsilon on the front. However, if the consonant that it begins with is a ro, then that ro is doubled. So they add an epsilon and then a ro. I wonder what would happen if it begins with a rough breathing, in which the verb phonetically begins with an H sound. I would assume that since this kind of H sound can only be at the beginning of a word, it wouldn't make sense to give it the syllabic augment, as that would just delete the H sound, since you can't, and rough breath only goes at the beginning of words. So I think it would be temporal augments, and they just keep the rough breathing from ha to he. Now, this augment is only in the indicative forms of these tenses. other moods do not have the augment. For example, as you can see, the aorist infinitive does not augment. It just uses the normal aorist. It just uses the unaugmented aorist stem, which is the same as the future stem here.